Welcome to NATA's Real Talk. I'm your host, Ryan Wagasback, Senior Vice President with the National Air Transportation Association. Thrilled today to have a quick conversation with Alison Squiccimarro from the offices of Paul Lange on some interesting times that we're facing with the vaccine mandate for 100 plus employees. Alison, thank you for joining me.
Happy to. It's a changing time and a lot of new information coming out every day. It seems like there's something new. So happy to give some information to your members on how to be prepared for what's ahead.
And I think that's key, right? Be prepared. We've got to be prepared of what's coming down the road. So private companies, 100 plus employees, is this per location? Is this total, all locations? How does that flow?
I think that a company needs to be prepared for it to apply 100 employees total, including full-time, part-time. In other words, if at any point in the last 24 months you've had 100 people on staff, including all your locations, you need to be prepared to address this.
What happens, right? We're hearing a lot of different scenarios, real world, right? Where you've got some of your employees that are just absolutely unwilling to get vaccinated. Just hard line draw. We're specifically looking at crew situations where you may have one crew member that is in the cockpit, right, vaccinated, and the other that's unwilling. I mean, any advice to operations on what they need to be doing, or hard lines from an operator's perspective?
So I think that what we're going to see is there is going to be a component for testing. And that's important because even if you don't recognize like a personal preference, a political view, whatever it is, you may not necessarily need to accommodate them, but you do need to accommodate those employees who can't be vaccinated for a medical reason or for a religious reason. They have a sincerely held religious belief that precludes them from being vaccinated. And the law requires that those employees be accommodated. And I think that the way we're going to see them be accommodated is going to be through some testing component. And it's going to be a weekly testing. It's likely going to require a PCR testing.
Not even antigen. It's going to be PCR.
I think it's going to be PCR.
Okay.
That seems to be the gold standard. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong. Okay. It's really just predicting what's coming ahead. So I do think that it probably is going to be a PCR test.
And the employer is going to have to pay for the testing, correct?
Not clear.
Not clear. Okay. And how do we work this with, is it time off?
There's going to need to be components for time off to vaccinate those that are willing to be vaccinated that don't have an exemption. You're going to need to accommodate their need for time off for the actual vaccination appointment, as well as any days that they might need to recover from the side effects. So that's going to be one component of time off. And you're also going to need to determine whether or not you're going to give people time off to engage in the testing, and how that's going to work. And I think that, at this point, you probably could require them to have the testing done on their own time. So, get tested on Saturdays, or get tested on a day off, and everyone needs to have a test within 72 hours of arrival on Mondays. I recognize that many of your members are a 7-day 24/7 operation, and that's going to present some different challenges. My suggestion is that you pick a day of the week and you set a time, and you have that be the time, and the employee is then responsible for going out and getting the testing and presenting it to you in the form that you require. And if it's not in, they're not on your premises.
And employers should be logging all of this data, correct?
Employers should be tracking it. It should be kept separately from the personnel records. And it should be confidential.
Okay, that's fantastic information. Challenges, right? Every time we turn on the news, we hear states saying, yep, not in Texas, not in Florida. How do you envision, if I'm an operation, if I'm an FBO, an airport, a charter operation in some of these states that are challenging this federal mandate, what does this look like?
So there are a number of states, I think when I last looked at it, it's roughly a dozen that are, taking some sort of action against this. And we're going to have to follow and see what happens in those jurisdictions. We don't know when OSHA is going to release the ETS. We do know that it's in draft. There's been some rumors about what's in there. But when it becomes available, it could become available in days or it can become available in weeks or months. My sense is that they're moving pretty quickly and it's probably measured in, weeks at this point. But it's all rumor and speculation at this point.
So if you are in an area that is challenging this, it would be smart to have a plan in place no matter what.
I think you need to be prepared to have it in place. Generally, there's a lot of issues that could impact which way this goes. Generally, federal law wins out over state's law, but there could be challenges that eliminate certain components of the law or invalidate portions of it. But I think that employers should right now be checking to determine whether or not they have 100 employees. Look at roughly the last 2 years. Look at it. If you've never had 100 employees, but last year you had 96, you might want to think that you need to be thinking that you're going to fall within the scope of this.
That's a great point. I'm at 92, 96. I'm taking on more aircraft, right? I'm scaling up with the demand. I need to be prepared for Q1 of 2022 to reach over that 100 employee mark.
Right, and if you go over that threshold, you want to be prepared to deal with it. And I think that ways that you can prepare yourself right now is first, take a survey of your employees. What percentage do you have that are vaccinated? What percentage do you have that are unvaccinated? Do a confidential survey. Figure out how many employees who are unvaccinated are going to claim medical exemptions. How many are going to claim religious exemptions? How many are going to say, I'm just not comfortable with it. I just don't want it.
Right.
And figure out what the scope of your problem is, really. Get a handle on that now so that way you understand what you need to do. And you could set your policy based on real information. So what you're willing to undertake for a few people might not necessarily be what you'd be willing to do if 25% of your workforce was not vaccinated. If you had what you're willing to accommodate for 2 people, 3 people is probably different than what you're willing to accommodate for a dozen or 2 dozen employees. So you should get a handle on what the scope of your problem is. Do a confidential survey, try and figure out how many are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And then you can determine how you're going to handle your religious exemptions, how you're going to handle your medical exemptions, and start getting those, identified. And then also you're going to have to figure out a component of how you're going to accommodate those employees that are going to fall into an exemption. There's some legal challenges against United's vaccine mandate out there right now. And quite frankly, I surprised at the fact that in one case, there was a very limited temporary restraining order that was issued going to, I think, October 26th. And in another case, it was outright denied. And that was surprising to me because I thought that United's accommodation of placing employees on unpaid leave of absence was not going to stand up to scrutiny. But it appears as though courts in Texas and Colorado are really looking at that hard, and it might pass muster.
Well, Alison, I can't thank you enough for this valuable information in this timely manner. Thank you to our members we will definitely have more information in the coming days and weeks ahead. Stay tuned.